Good evening. We'd like to welcome you all to our Wednesday night Bible study. We're going to be continuing our class tonight, searching for Jesus. And tonight, we're going to be looking at the topic, a prophet like Moses. And so we're going to be talking a lot about Moses tonight, talking about his origins, what he did in his ministry, or in his, not ministry, in service to God. And we will promise we will get to talking about Jesus as we have every lesson this quarter. It's very interesting. I mean, we're talking about Moses. We're only in Exodus. Now, granted, Genesis, as far as historically speaking, is a large chunk of the Old Testament. And so by the time you get to Exodus, you have covered a lot of history already. But as far as in terms of books of the Old Testament, we're only in Exodus, and yet we have already seen Jesus in so many different places, and that's because the entire Old Testament points to Jesus. We chose this class knowing that we probably weren't getting past, the Pentateuch with this class, that we probably weren't making it out of it, knowing that there's just so many things that point right towards Christ. Now, I will go ahead and tell you, we actually are going to get past the first 5 books of the Old Testament. We are going to get into talking about David and Jonah and others that kind of represent the kings and the prophets in later lessons in this quarter. We only have a few more lessons to go, and so we will be advancing on to those. But tonight, we're talking about a prophet like Moses. And so in order for us to set the scene and kind of get into this topic and point our way towards Jesus, we have to start with Moses himself. And so, in fact, we're going to go to Exodus chapter 1, starting verses 1 through 8, is where we'll start our class off tonight. And so as we begin, we see the children of Israel. In fact, it says, "Now these are the names of the children of Israel who came to Egypt. Each man in his household came with Jacob: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, Benjamin, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher. All those who were descendants of Jacob were 70 persons, for Joseph was in Egypt already. And Joseph died, all his brothers, and all that generation. But the children of Israel were fruitful and increased abundantly, multiplied and grew exceedingly mighty, and the land was filled with them. Now there arose a king over Egypt who did not know Joseph, and he said to his people, 'Look, the people of the children of Israel are more mightier than we. Come, let us deal shrewdly with them, lest they multiply. And it happen in the event of war, they shall also join our enemies and fight against us, and so go up of the land.'" We see here in these opening 9 or 10 verses of the book of Exodus that you have a people, and this people it is quite large in number. Now these are the Israelites. These are the children of Jacob. They have now come to Egypt, as we talked about there in the end of Genesis. They have come to Egypt where Joseph resided already, and where he had provisions not only for all of Egypt, but for faraway nations that came to Egypt to receive those provisions. And it was because of Joseph and his relationship with God, and really God himself, that provided for these people in this great time of famine. So now the people of here, and they've lived here so long, they have now grown into a very mighty people. And so here in the time period just preceding the time period of Moses, here is a people that is great in number and size, and in fact, they were feared by the Egyptians. And so not only did the Egyptians no longer recognize Joseph and his family, all they really saw was a threat. They saw the threat that the children of Israel were to them. And so as we pick up there in verse 11, it says, "Therefore they set taskmasters over them to afflict them with their burdens, and they built for Pharaoh supply cities, Pithom and Ramses. But they more afflicted them, the more they multiplied and grew, and they were in dread of the children of Israel." So here the children of Israel, they went from being just hated and feared to slaves and workers that worked very hard. And this is going to be the time period in which, in the years following this, that Moses is going to come about. He's going to come about during a time period of slavery, and this is going to be what he is born into. He's born into a culture that is that they are impoverished, that they are slaves, that they have taskmasters over them, and they are having to work very hard for some other man and for some other gods to supply for them their every need. And you can only imagine the pain and the agony and the suffering and just probably the embarrassment, so many emotions, I can't even name them all, that they would have felt. And so this is kind of the culture and this is the mindset of people as Moses is being born, but it's more than that. It's more than just slavery. In fact, in order to keep the children of Israel down and not allow their armies to resupply and to grow larger and larger and larger, because it said, every time they had persecuted, they kept growing and growing and growing, and nothing was really slowing them down. And so the order was put in place that the male children be killed. Female children could live, male children were to be put to death and cast into the river. We can see that in Exodus chapter 1 in verses 15 through 22, that actually the midwives were to take part in this and the slaying of these children, and many would not participate. They would not, and they allowed these children to live. Moses happened to be one of those children, but we all know that with a child, it is going to be very hard to conceal a child in a land in which everyone wants him dead. And so after a period of time, this child is placed in a basket among the reeds by the river and is later discovered by essentially Pharaoh's daughter, who takes this child, as we see there in this chapter, who takes this child, we're now into chapter 2, and basically has him for her own. Now, before he really comes fully into her home and into her house, he actually, as we see there in Exodus chapter 2, in verses 7 through 10, we see that Moses has the opportunity to be nursed by his mother, and I wonder, I kind of speculate, I wonder if she was able to instill in him some of the values of his people, of his real people, not the people he was being raised with, but in his Jewish heritage and his Israelite people, because we do see Moses at a later point in his life return to those people, and we're going to see that pretty shortly tonight. But you see that there's a period of nursing that takes place to Moses from his mother, and there's care that's provided, but he is raised, as we see there in Exodus chapter 2 and verse 10. It says, let me get there. And the child grew, and she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. So she called his name Moses, saying, because I drew him out of the water. So Moses is Pharaoh's daughter's son. And so he is being raised there in the house of Pharaoh. He is being raised in a position that was going to have a lot of perks, maybe even a lot of power that went along with his position. I've heard people even speculate to the fact that Moses might have been in line to be Pharaoh one day. I've heard people that they have come against that, and they said that's not true, that there would have been another child, another place. Whatever the case is, he was still in a high position of prominence, and that was going to be a great place to live, you let you think. But Moses is going to do something in his life. He's going to make some personal decisions, and he's going to make some choices. And some will even say that Moses is going to make some mistakes. So, what does Moses do to lose his kind of position there in Egypt? Well, he commits murder. He kills. In Exodus chapter 2, verses 11 and through 15, we'll read that together. Now, it came to pass in those days when Moses was grown that he went out to his brethren and looked at their burdens, and he saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his brethren. So he looked this way and that way, and when he saw no one, he killed the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. And when he went out the second day, behold, 2 Hebrew men were fighting, and he said to the one who did the wrong, why are you striking your companion? Then he said, who made you a prince and judge over us? Do you intend to kill me as you killed the Egyptian? So Moses feared and said, surely this thing is known, When Pharaoh heard of this matter, he sought to kill Moses, but Moses fled from the face of Pharaoh and dwelt in the land of Midian, and he sat down by a well. So here is a situation, and it's really hard. We're not in their time period. We have very little written here about the context, but what does it say that Moses did? It says Moses killed a man. It also says that Moses had a reason to look around. He took the time to look left, to look right, to look every which way. He knew that if somebody saw him doing this, that he was going to be in some type of trouble. And so he knew that this might not be necessarily the right thing to do. He rises up and killed this man. Now, we can have all the discussions in the world about, well, was he actually providing defense, self-defense? And we can have that in this conversation. But Moses seems to hear, he looks around, he wants to see who's watching. Maybe it was a matter of self-defense. I'm not there to judge the situation. I'm telling you what he did. And what he did is he rose up and killed a man. And then he tried to hide it, and he covered it up, and he buried the man in the sand. And then when it comes to his interaction with his fellow brethren, it actually hurt his influence with his brethren, with his companions. That a companion, they were arguing, they were striking each other, and now they're like, well, who are you? Who are you to judge and be a prince over us? You've killed a man. So obviously it wasn't necessarily looked kindly upon from his companions and people that knew him well. And so we see the situation in which, yes, Moses, he killed someone, and now that it's found out, not only by his companions, but now it's found out by Pharaoh himself, that Pharaoh was angry. And Moses is forced to flee, and he flees to Midian, and it says that there he sat down by a well. Now here in Midian, in verses 16 through 20, we're going to see Moses in the house of Reuel, and he's going to find for himself a wife in Zipporah, Reuel's daughter, in verse 21. And Moses is going to have for himself a family. We see that going down in chapter 2 in verse 22. It says, and she bore him a son. He called his name Gershom, for he said, I have been a stranger in a foreign land. And so here is Moses, and he is now in his period of his time in Midian. Now notice this, Moses is going to spend approximately 40 years in Egypt. He's going to spend approximately 40 years in Midian, and he's going to have another 40 years in his wandering and in his time period. That's kind of the way Moses' life breaks down in his time frame. But Moses, he's going to start a family. He's going to, have a job. He's going to, be living a normal life away from Egypt, away from all that persecution. But where's Moses' people? His people are still enslaved. His people are still being held by an oppressive government, and they have taskmasters over them. And so God is going to hear the cries of this people. Verse 24, so God heard their groaning, and God remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. And God looked upon the children of Israel, and God acknowledged them. Now, these two verses here say a lot to me about God and his nature. It says he's the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Why is he the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? He's their God because they were also his people. I have a feeling if Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob hadn't been faithful, he wouldn't have been called the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He was their God because they were faithful and they were serving after him. Joseph would seemingly seem to serve after God as well. That's why God blessed him. But Abraham, Isaac, Jacob were the fathers of that family. They were the leaders of that group. And so forevermore, he was remembered. He's the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And so now we have come down to Moses' time period, and God, he sees his people. And God will be with a person. He will be with his people that choose him and choose to follow after him. God sees his people in anguish. He sees them in pain. It says God acknowledged them. Now that right there is a lesson in itself. God saw the evil that was existing in this world. He saw the pain that people were going through, and he acknowledged it. And that should tell us something about our life. Our life is not just our own. It's not just our own to live and to do what we want to do, but we are placed here in this world to serve an almighty God. And part of serving an almighty God is acknowledging souls, acknowledging people. acknowledge them in their pain, acknowledge them in their suffering, acknowledge in their position as being possibly lost before God, and responding. We had to respond, right? We had to respond to the call of Christ. We had to respond to his gospel, to his message. It's part of God's nature. He responded. He responded to the pain. He responded to the agony. He responded to the calls. He responds to our repentance. He responds. We need to respond. And so you see this as nature of God, and it sets up here that now he's about to call for himself a leader. He's going to make a call, not a phone call, but he's going to call a leader. And how does Moses respond? So we come to Exodus chapter 31, and we're going to start there in verses 1. We're going to read verses 1 through 6. I'm sorry, not Exodus 31. Exodus 3, 1 through 6. I forgot my colon, apparently. Exodus 3, verses 1 through 6. And it says, "Now Moses was tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the back of the desert and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of the fire from the midst of the bush. So he looked, and behold, the bush was burning with fire, but the bush was not consumed. Then Moses said, I will now turn aside and see this great sight, why the bush does not burn. So when the Lord saw that he turned aside to look, God called to him from the midst of the bush and said, Moses, Moses. And he said, Here I am. Then he said, Do not draw near this place. Take your sandals off your feet, for the place where you stand is holy ground. Moreover, he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look upon God. So like we said, Moses has started his life. He's been living his life. It was not every day that Moses looked up and saw a bush burning. It was also not every day that he looks up and sees a bush that is burning that is not being consumed. In fact, there is nobody in this room that has ever seen anything that was on fire that was not actually burning up from that fire. I think about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They're in a fire. They're walking around. That's amazing in itself. They are not being burned up by the fire. They come out of the fire. They don't even smell like smoke. The bush is there. It is burning. It looks like it's just engulfed with flames, and yet it's not being consumed. Why? Because of God. Because of him, because of who he was. He is literally a burning fire, but it's a different kind of burning fire. It's not the destructive burning fire that we think of. It is something that is far greater, because God is far greater. So God has the ability and the power to be a burning fire and yet not actually burn something up. So here, Moses, he sees this burning bush, and it at least intrigues him. He is at least curious about the nature of this bush, why this is going on. And so he says he turns aside, and as he turns aside, God sees this action from Moses, and God calls out from the bush, and he addresses Moses, and Moses is his servant, and he tells Moses, do not come near. The ground you are on is holy ground, and he is to take off his sandals. He is to present himself in a way that is holy, that is appropriate, that shows respect unto God. And Moses wants to hide his face from the Lord because he can't even look upon him. Now, we discussed this same passage when we talked about the angel of the Lord. And in our discussion of the angel of the Lord, that he can't look upon this being or this person, because we know that if you see God, you die. And so Moses is fearful for his life because he equates the angel of the Lord and God as being one and the same. And so Moses does not look upon this spokesman. He does not look upon God. Instead, he hides his face. But why did Moses see this burning bush? Why did God come to him? What was the purpose of this? So let's move on to verses 7 through 10. And the Lord said, I have surely seen the oppression of my people who are in Egypt and have heard their cry because of their taskmasters, for I know their sorrows. Now, just listen to that. I mean, he saw it, he heard it, and he knows. That's a lesson in itself. So I've come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians and to bring them up from the land to a good and large land, to a land flowing with milk and honey, to a place of the Canaanites and the Hittites and the Amorites and the Perizzites and the Hivites and the Jebusites. Now therefore, behold, the cry of the children of Israel has come to me, and I have also seen the oppression with which the Egyptians oppressed them. Come now, therefore, and I will send you to Pharaoh, that you may bring my people, the children of Egypt, or the children of Israel, out of Egypt. So here in this passage, we see that Moses was called to be a deliverer. He was called to be someone that was going to go, that was going to be God's spokesman, that was going to deliver the people out of this oppressive nation and to help them come to a land that was far greater. It describes the land here as a land that was flowing with milk and honey, but it also describes the land, it's a land that is possessed by a lot of people. I mean, he lists off nation after nation after nation that are living in this land. And so you have a couple of different things. It's a great and wonderful land, but yet it's already claimed by somebody else. And the implication of that is just astounding. And that here, people are going to come in and something's going to have to happen. Either God is going to, by himself, take it from the people and wipe out, which is totally in God's power to do. Or God is going to use a people that are obedient to him to come in and to take this land, which is what God tried to get them to do. Or you got the answer that the children of Israel gave, and as we're studying in the book of Judges, that you have a people that were sometimes obedient and sometimes did what they wanted to do. And so you have a land that ended up eventually being kind of mixed of the children of Israel and mixed of the people of the Canaanites and all these nations that lived there. They were supposed to run out of town that they didn't do. And so you see a promise by God, and he's perfect, and his promises are perfect. But you see a people that, like they mess things up from this promise that's given here from Moses and the promise that would have been carried out had the people carried out their side of the bargain. But here, Moses, he is given a task. He's given a task to be this leader and to lead the people out of Egypt. Now, what we see is from Moses, as we look in verses 11 through 14, is Moses is like most of us. He looks for a reason not to do it. He looks for a reason to complain. He looks for a reason to either doubt himself, and maybe you can even say doubt God and doubt the calling in which he was called. It says in verse 11, but Moses said to God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and that I should bring the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt? So he said, I will certainly be with you, and you shall go, and this shall be a sign to you that I have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you shall serve God on this mountain. Then Moses said to God, indeed, when I come to Israel and say to them, when I come to the children of Israel and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you, and they say to me, what is his name? What shall I say to them? And God said to Moses, I am who I am. And he says, thus you shall say to the children of Israel, I am has sent me to you. Now, within these 3 or 4 verses here, you see that he's complaining at first and saying, well, who am I? And then he's going on, and some people just see this statement here that he made, like, well, who do I say sent me, as an honest question. I kind of put it in the same context of his complaint. That here is his complaint that, well, who do I say sent me? It's like I don't know. That might be me reading into that, so just take that with a grain of salt. But I see a little bit of Moses' attitude in this, that he's having at least a lot of self-doubt and maybe a little bit of doubt in what he's being called to do. But we see God here in these passages through and through. And God confirms who he is, and he actually tells him, I am has sent you. And that's what he is to tell the people that he is going to free. And so we see more complaints from Moses as you come into Exodus chapter 4, verses 1 through 16. He complains he's not eloquent enough of a speaker. There's all kinds of reasons and that he shouldn't be the one. Surely there's somebody better to send. Moses does not take this job immediately. This is not a task that he immediately just goes and takes from the very first word of the Lord. It takes him a little bit of time, but finally you get down to Exodus chapter 4, and verses 17 through 31. And you see finally that you see in verse 18, so Moses went and returned to Jethro, his father-in-law, and said to him, please let me go and return to my brethren who are in Egypt and see whether they are still alive. And Jethro said to Moses, go in peace. And you're going to see that in these next several verses, Moses is finally going to go back to Egypt to set people free, because he was God's spokesman, and he was also God's deliverer that was going to go and deliver the people. Now, we do not have time to dive into everything that transpired there in Egypt in his deliverance, because we do have to get to the point of the lesson tonight, which is Jesus. But as we look at this from Exodus chapter 5, really to Exodus chapter 12 and verse 30, we're going to see the period which he has come to Egypt. He has presented himself there before Pharaoh, and there in Exodus 5, all the way through every last one of the 10 plagues. Now, those 10 plagues were not just plagues. They were not just curses upon the land that destroyed the land and the people and killed children in the very last one. It wasn't just that. Those 10 plagues attacked the gods and the culture of the Egyptian people. It showed who the Almighty God really was. It showed who was in charge and who was not in charge. It showed who was the real God versus all these fake gods that the land of Egypt had. And so these were not just 10 plagues that he decided to just plague the people with. These things stood as a test of who God truly was, and it showed the punishment that would come down upon a people that would oppress his people. And God did punish often the oppressors of his people, and Egypt happened to be one of those. And so in Exodus chapter 5 through Exodus chapter 12 and verse 30, we see the account of these 10 plagues and how they came about. And over again, you have Pharaoh who he kind of, in the beginning, he kind of just shrugs it off. And then as time goes on, he's like, well, maybe. And then his heart it hardens again, and back and forth and back and forth. And finally, through the death of the firstborn, his spirit is broken to the point that all of Egypt begs the children of Israel to leave. It's not just, okay, you can go. They beg them to leave. And in fact, the children of Israel have been so, courteous and wise in their dealings with their neighbors there in Egypt that they plunder them. And when they leave Egypt, they leave as a wealthy nation. They leave with all types of goods that have been given to them by the Egyptian people. So this Exodus was a triumphant defeat of the Egyptian people. Their gods have been put to the test. The God of heaven has been proven to be the God of all. The goods of the land are, greatly diminished because they have left with the Israelite people. And then when the armies do pursue them, they are drowned in the middle of the Red Sea when the sea comes crashing down upon them. And so you see here that this is a great deliverance for the people of Israel and a great destruction for the people of Egypt. And you see that the Exodus and that crossing from Exodus chapter 12, verse 31 to Exodus chapter 14 and verse 31. And so that brings us to the time period of the wilderness wanderings and their time of headed towards Mount Sinai and headed towards that land. Moses was going to be their leader. He was going to be God's spokesman, just as he had been in Egypt while through the deliverance. Granted, Aaron was Moses' spokesman. In fact, Aaron was called Moses' prophet. A prophet, as we're going to see later, is a spokesman. So Aaron was actually Moses' prophet. He spoke for Moses. Moses was God's spokesman, and he would be the speaker not only in Egypt, but now out in the wilderness. And so we come to Exodus chapter 16, is where we're going to pick up at. Exodus chapter 16 and verses 1 through 3. As we come to Exodus 16, the people they're in the wilderness. they're away from Egypt, and Moses has been very faithful in his deliverance and his message that he has provided there before Egypt, before the people of Israel. And it says there in Exodus 16, verses 1, and they journeyed from Elim, and all the congregation of the children of Israel came to the wilderness of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month, after they departed from the land of Egypt. Then the whole congregation of the children of Israel complained against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness, and the children of Israel said to them, "Oh, that we had died by the hand of the Lord in Egypt, when we sat by the pots of meat, and we ate bread to the full, for you have brought us into the wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger." So how long was that? It says on the 15th day of the second month, after they departed from the land. This is not very a long period of time. They haven't been gone too terribly long, from this nation. I would think they would still be rejoicing. We're free. We're away from this land. But no, their thoughts were on their flesh, on their bodies, on their hunger. They desired the pots of meat and the pots of food they set by in Egypt, even if it meant taskmasters, even if it meant that they would have died in that land. That's how badly they were complaining there before the Lord. And the Lord does feed them. The Lord does provide for them in this time period. In fact, in Exodus 16, as we move on from this, you're going to see that he provides manna and quail. You're going to see as he comes to Exodus chapter 17, verses 1 through 7, you're going to see the provision of water. And this is the instance where he allows the striking of the rock, and where that is what Moses is told to do. So God provides for them, but they still complained. That was still their nature in this land. And so we're going to see a people, they're not even to the point of time of receiving the law yet, that they've already started complaining. They've already started whining. Why are we out here? Are we just going to die? And now they come to Sinai. When we come to Sinai, this is going to be the period of time from Exodus chapter 19 to Exodus chapter 34, and verse 28. You're going to see Moses and the people of Israel receiving the law. And as you come there into the 19 and 20, as you're coming through those chapters, what you're going to see is that at first God, when he speaks, he has the people be ready. He has the people ready in a very precise way to receive the law. And then when the law is spoken, the people of Israel actually do not want to hear God anymore, and they want Moses just to go up and let Moses go here. So the people have a lot to do with the fact that Moses is going to be allowed by God eventually to go up and to receive the law that is given to them. But when you go from Exodus 19 to Exodus 34, you're going to notice that within this time period that Moses is receiving a lot of the law, and the law is more than just the Ten Commandments. The law is not just 10 commandments. Oftentimes we think of Old Testament law, we think of 10 commandments. It's more than that. It has everything to do with the feast days we talked about, the ceremonies, the garments, the tabernacle. All of these things took place within their law. So it's more than just 10 laws that they had to follow. But while all this is going on, and you get almost to the very end of this, they had the tablets ready. Moses is coming down the mountain, and yet what are the people doing? The people are down there, and in this time period that Moses has been gone, the people have decided that he's been gone too long. Now, granted, they're the ones that didn't want to hear the law to begin with, but Moses has been gone too long. And so they had Aaron make for them gods, make for them statues, and they were dancing around and performing types of acts that should not have been named among any people. But that's what Moses comes down the mountain to find. Now, you can only imagine his frustration and his anger that here he's been in as close to the presence of God as you can possibly be. He's been receiving this law this entire time, and he comes down the mountain, and that's what you find. So what does Moses do? Well, Moses, he's going to break these stones, and these stones are representative of this law, and he literally is going to break these. But you see Moses in all of this. He was continually God's spokesman, his deliverer, the receiver of the law. He was really a lawgiver in the sense that he came from God to deliver this law to the people. He would have to go back up the mountain again. He would have to receive the law and the engraved stones once again and bring them back. And in fact, those stones would end up in the Ark of the Covenant later on. And so you see this whole nature that Moses is really trying to deliver these people. In fact, the law that is given to Moses and the children of Israel from that point on would be known as the law of Moses. That's what we refer to it as. We refer to it as the law of Moses. Why? Because the law was given to Moses and the children of Israel. He was the leader of the land. And so by the time you come to the book of Hebrews in the New Testament, part of the book of Hebrews is being written to show how much greater Jesus was than Moses and the law and everything that it represented. That Jesus was far greater than that. And so here is an incredible spokesman. In fact, you see there in Exodus chapter 34, verses 29 to 35, he draws near to God. He's in the presence of God. And in fact, as Moses comes back down, his face is glowing that he has been in the presence of the Lord. And that is just an amazing thing that no one else was like Moses. No one else was a prophet like Moses in that time period. There were a lot of prophets that would come after Moses, but Moses set a standard that the rest of them just couldn't do. They weren't called to do in that sort of way. Moses was very special. Now, notice this as we come here. It says he was God's prophet. And I do not know the correct pronunciation of this, but what does it say? Nabi, a spokesman, a speaker, a prophet. This is what Moses was to the people. Now let's come to Deuteronomy chapter 18, verses 15 to 22. It says, the Lord your God will raise up for you a prophet like me from your midst, from your brethren. Him you shall hear, according to all you desired of the Lord your God in Horeb in the day of the assembly, saying, let me not hear again the voice of the Lord my God, nor let me see the great fire anymore, lest I die. And the Lord said to me, what they have spoken is good. I will raise up for them a prophet like you from among their brethren, and will put my words in his mouth, and he shall speak to them all that I command him. And it shall be that whoever will not hear my words, which he speaks in my name, I will require it of him. But the prophet who presumes to speak a word in my name, which I have not commanded him to speak, or who speaks in the name of other gods, that prophet shall die. And if you say in your heart, how shall we know the word which the Lord has not spoken? When a prophet speaks in the name of the Lord, if the thing does not happen or come to pass, that is the thing which the Lord has not spoken. The prophet has spoken it presumptuously. You shall not be afraid of him. Here is Moses in his own words saying there's going to come a prophet like him. That there is going to be a prophet that's going to be like him. And as you see there in the text, translators have come back and they have capitalized that word prophet over and over again in many translations, so you know kind of who this is pointing to as we come down. Now, you come to Deuteronomy chapter 34, and what you're going to find is the death of Moses. And Moses, like any mortal man, does die. It says, then Moses went up from the plains of Moab to Mount Nebo, to the top of Pisgah, which is across from Jericho. And the Lord showed him all the land of Gilead as far as Dan, all Naphtali and the land of Ephraim, Manasseh, and all the land of Judah as far as the western sea, the south, the plain of the valley of Jericho, the city of palm trees, as far as Zor. And the Lord said to him, this is the land of which I swore to give Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, saying, I will give to your descendants. I have caused you to see it with your eyes, but you shall not cross over there. So Moses, the servant of the Lord, died in the land of Moab, according to the word of the Lord, and he buried him in a valley in the land of Moab, opposite Beth Peor. but no one knows his grave to this day. Moses was 120 years old when he died. His eyes were not dim, nor his natural vigor diminished. But the children of Israel wept for Moses in the plains of Moab 30 days. So the days of weeping and mourning of Moses ended. Now Joshua, the son of Nun, was full of the spirit of wisdom, but Moses had laid hands on him. So the children of Israel heeded him and did as the Lord had commanded Moses. But since then there has not arisen in Israel a prophet like Moses, whom the Lord knew face to face, and all the signs and wonders which the Lord sent him to do in the land of Egypt, before Pharaoh, before all his servants, and in all his land, and by all that mighty power and all that great terror which Moses performed in the sight of all Israel. The life of Moses stood as a great testament of what a great man of God can be and should be. Now, Moses was not perfect. That's why Moses was not allowed entrance into that land. He only got to see it from a distance. But as we come to the New Testament, we're going to see that prophet. The law and the prophets, as we see there in Luke chapter 16 and verses 19 through 31, was the focal point of their religion. It was what the people followed. In fact, that's what the rich man is told there in Abraham's bosom, that if this people will not hear the law and the prophets, then they're not going to hear somebody that comes back from the dead. As we look in Luke chapter 24, verses 25 through 53, we see that every bit of the law and the prophets is going to point straight towards Christ. And Christ himself is confirmed by the Father in Matthew chapter 3 and verse 17 at his baptism, when he's confirmed that this is my son in whom I am well pleased. And also in Matthew 17 and verse 5, when he says, this is my son. And then he concludes that statement by saying, hear ye him. And this is on the Mount of Transfiguration. God confirms over and over again that the prophet, that the spokesman that people need to be listening to is his son. And so as we come down to Hebrews chapter 1, verses 1 through 4, and let's turn over there for a moment. Hebrews chapter 1, verses 1 through 4. We are out of time. It says, God, who at various times and in various ways spoke in times past to the fathers by their prophets, has in these last days spoken to us by his Son, whom he has appointed heir of all things, through whom he made the worlds. We see that God says that he spoke through his Son. And in Acts chapter 3, in verses 11 through 26, in preaching by Peter, and in Acts chapter 7, in verses 37 through 53, and the sermon by Stephen before Stephen is stoned to death. In both of these accounts, both of these men referring to Jesus refer to him as the prophet like Moses. We see the Old Testament deals over and over again with great men and their life and their accounts and what they stood for. All of that pointed toward a time period when the coming of the Messiah. Jesus Christ is the fulfillment of so many Old Testament prophecies, and every single one of those prophecies came true. He is that true spokesman. He is that true prophet. Remember what we said earlier, that if a prophet's word does not come true, then that word is not from God. Everything Jesus spoke was true, is true, and will always remain true. He is the ultimate prophet. He is a prophet like Moses, and this is another way we can see Jesus in the Old Testament. Thank you for your attention, and we will continue this study next week.